My name's Mike Rousseau. I'm the Director of Technology at a company called Versatile Distribution Services. And at that company, I design systems for post-production and broadcast.
My name is Eric Salinga, and I work as a solution architect for media and entertainment workflows.
My first thought of getting into the film and video field was wanting to do something more hands-on when I was in college. So when I first went to college, I did what a lot of people do. You start as a business major or something like that. I took an accounting class. I could not stand it. I hated it. And then I had met someone through a friend of mine who worked, their brother-in-law worked in television and broadcast in Boston. And I saw a camera sitting on his living room floor, and I thought, oh, that's interesting. You can do that for a living? So then I started looking into the programs which had to do with, media arts, things like that. That's how I got involved in it.
If we go back all the way, it's seeing the original 1933 King Kong movie at the Fitchburg Public Library when I was probably like 6 years old. Thought the movie Magic was amazing, and just was always into watching movies growing up. Big Star Wars nuts, of course, growing up in the 70s and 80s. And then locally here in the city that I grew up in, Fitchburg State, had a good film program. Found myself here and went on from there.
How I ended up working at Avid, why I chose working there, is when I learned about the technology when I was in school, everything was tape-based. And at that point in time, Avid was like this new, great, up-and-coming, what was referred to as non-linear editing. And it was a local company. So just from the contacts I had when I interned in the production field and things like that, they had an Avid system. They used to call it the Avid, like it was this mysterious machine, So I basically just put a resume in there, looking for a job once I graduated, and that's how I ended up there.
So like most people, I started in support, taking phone calls from editors, whether they were in film or television. I mostly focused on film because we kind of split people into two different disciplines, film versus video. So I had a film background, understood cut lists, key numbers, things like that, and the telecine process. So started in support, learned a lot from there, then started working in the field, would go and actually do system installs for customers, and then began to do the actual architecture of it, so talking to customers, finding out what their needs were, what problems they were trying to solve with the technology, and we would design solutions. And
editing before computers were introduced was painful, would be the best way to put it. It was very time consuming. If you made a mistake, it was a little bit more of a challenge. Not a little bit more, it was a lot of a challenge. Just simple things like effects that you would put on, like a simple dissolve, things like that. If you didn't have the right control surface with a tape-to-tape editor, a lot of those things became a challenge. Most of it was just cuts. And then if you went to a larger tape-based editing system, I had learned the first computer-assisted tape-based editing system I used was a Sony BVE 910, which actually had a PC involved with the tape decks, and that allowed you to do some different transitions, almost like a 3D, not really 3D, but more complicated effects, where that non-linear now is just, you guys drag like a little icon on your cut and boom, it's that easy. So
film, obviously being shot on the physical medium of film strips like this, would be shot and you'd have your negative, and then that negative would be, that's your gold. You don't want anything to happen to that. You want it protected. So then you would get prints done, and then those prints would be edited and viewed on a machine like this, the Steenbeck, or you'd have an upright Moviola, and you're literally going through, finding the frame where you want to make the edit with a literal razor blade, cut that, little tape over that, splice it together, and you'd go on. And technically, you could say that film was non-linear editing because you'd cut out any piece you wanted and place it in, but you still had to assemble it into a linear fashion. we do that now digitally.
Yeah, so we're old enough that we actually saw standard definition go to high definition. You know, things that you can, like I said jokingly, but it's true, things you can shoot on your phone are light years beyond quality of what you used to see every day on TV. You know, film going all digital. So there's a camera called the Red camera. So there's a movie you guys can watch, or a film you guys can watch, called The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. That's the first full-length feature film shot with no film. You can just tell the difference between video and film. It just looks different. But Red camera makes your digital acquisition from this camera look like you're shooting it with 35 millimeter film. And was it George Lucas in some of the Star Wars films?
Yeah.
He inserted, so in some of the
Digital
newer
shots.
Star Wars films, yeah, certain shots he inserted with the Red camera next to 35 millimeter shots to see if people could tell the difference. I don't know if George Lucas ever said what scenes he did put in there to see if people could tell.
Yeah, no, I think it was the ones that required a lot more digital CGI effects. So
Is the ones he did.
yeah.
So we actually worked together at Avid. So he was on the film side, I was more on the video side. But what we were starting to just touch upon is, you know, what all you guys use today, how you edit today, all the content you guys have today. There was a whole process involved before. You know, non-linear editing made things faster, made things easier, made people be more creative because they could do so many versions. But it's not like you could take what was in an Avid back then and just broadcast it on TV. The quality was just terrible. So when it was digitized in, it was very, very low quality. So basically you made or created in what was called an EDL, or an edit decision list, and that was still brought from the Avid to a tape editor. Because the original tape recordings, not film, but this, we're just talking about videotape at this point, those original tape recordings were the highest quality. So the Avid just made it simpler to create what you were gonna edit, and then you would import it into a digital editing system, or a computer-assisted editing system, I should say, and it would actually just perform the edits for you, tape to tape still. And that was the quality that actually got broadcast on air. Film was, you know, sort of the same thing, right? You
Yeah,
still
you-
had to cut the film.
Yeah, you would
Yeah.
edit it non-linearly in the Avid, and then you'd output a cut list. That cut list would go back to the negative cutter. The negative cutter would create the master negative, and then they'd make prints for that. Go to the movie theater. Now in the movie theaters, you're not even seeing things on film. Technically, it's all digital printed. So you're actually seeing a digital projection instead of an actual film projection.
Yeah, the industry's just changed a lot, but you know, to go from that delta of like, you know, Avid prices had come down, so I'd say at that point the average cost was between $50,000 and $70,000 for a system. To do the same thing for $1,500, because what Apple wanted to do is sell their systems, right? They wanted to sell their computers, so they were in essence almost giving the software away, because you're buying their system, and the software kind of came with it. So for a very small price. So changing industry a lot in, I think, in not necessarily a great way. You know, I've been on sites where there were Emmy award-winning documentary filmmakers that were insistent they would never use Final Cut ever. And I was like, why wouldn't you use Final Cut? And I'm like, because I spent a lot of money on the Avid, how to learn how to use it, and now I'm competing with kids like you out of college for jobs when I've been doing this for 35 years, you know. He's like, it's ridiculous. So, yeah.
What's your opinion on garden gnomes?
What is my opinion on garden gnomes?
Yes.
As long as they have an orange beard, all good.